What's up, everybody? I'm John Stinson. Tonight, you are at one of our open houses, and our guest speaker tonight is Matt Novesky, and I'm just going to let him tell his story. So without further ado, Matt Novesky. Come on up, man.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks, John.
Yes, sir.
It's good to be back. My name is Matt Novesky. I do a little bit of everything that you said except for the lawyer part. I'm an artist, songwriter, bassist for a band called Blue October for 26 years now. Producer, studio owner, part-time manager, and I'm sure there's something else in there as well. But, and I've done all of those.
Songwriter, right?
Songwriter. That's probably the most important, honestly.
Yeah.
And I've done all of those things for quite a while. Songwriting and playing bass came first, and I've been doing that since I was 11 years old. So I'll start there. I grew up in Michigan. I had a super musical family, 6 sisters and a brother, and everybody played an instrument. My parents did not play instruments, but myself and my siblings all played instruments. My older brother was a drummer, and growing up in Michigan, Motown was really big in my house, so always loved bass-driven music already. My uncle played bass. Big James Jamerson fan, and then wanting to play with my brother and just get to jam with my brother, just be rhythm section, kind of drove me to play bass guitar. I always say there's 2 types of bass players. There's the bass player was the worst guitar player in the band that just got handed the bass because they needed a bass player, which happens. And then there's the bass player that really loves bass and I like to think that I'm in that later category. So I
just taught somebody. I play guitar. I just taught my buddy.
Yeah, right.
I taught my buddy how to play bass.
There you go. Yeah, just play the root. You're good.
That's right.
So that's how I got into it, and I quickly realized that it was my hobby, but it was also my passion. It was what I loved to do, and then beyond that, then it was something that really. It's how I made friends. It's how I sort of built a community, was playing in bands and getting to play with other musicians and people that liked, rock music and hip hop and stuff like that. And so I was in a bunch of bands growing up, and, the battle of the bands was like the big thing to me. It wasn't, really sports or anything like that. It was more like, I can't wait till battle of the bands so we can play our concert. And that's my glory moment. That was high school. And then I started to realize that just from being in bands and being in really, just like you should, being in really terrible bands for a long time and just kind of figuring it all out, right? You get better and you get better. And then I started to realize that I really love writing songs. And I loved that collaborative process as well, getting not only to hang out with my friends, but to sit down and actually be creative and kind of bear our souls together. So I started writing songs seriously probably right after high school, my first couple years of college. And the music thing just started to kind of take off. And I was also sort of the person in the band that, I don't want to say the responsible one because that's usually the drummer, but I was the one that would mail out press kits and do all the things that now you can do easily like this. It used to be a lot of hard work, and I was always the hustler in the band. I was always trying to get us gigs and get us better gigs. And so one thing led to another. And when I was in my early 20s, I met a manager who at the time was Kid Rock's manager. And he had started working with this band called Blue October that was based out of Houston, lived in San Marcos. And my band had kind of fallen apart. I was sort of, looking for something. And long story short, he basically flew me down. It was a free trip. He flew me down to Austin, and being from Michigan, I had no idea what Texas was. I was like, oh, it's going to be tumbleweeds and big hats and belt buckles. And then I got to Austin, and I was like, this is amazing. This is awesome. This city is so cool. And back then, you'd go down to 6th Street and there was a band in every venue, it was just amazing. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. I was used to having to drive 4 hours to go see a concert, so just seeing so much live music every night was just so appealing to me. I was so excited about that. And then I met the band, and when I saw the band, there's sort of, in you as producers and songwriters, if you haven't already, you will experience this at some point. You'll meet somebody or you'll work with somebody and they'll just have that thing. And you don't know what it is. It's intangible. You can't put your finger on it. You can try to explain it, but no words will ever do it justice. You just know that there's something special about that person or that artist, and you're like, this is gonna do something. Like, if this doesn't do something, I don't know what will. And when I saw Blue October, because the CD, I heard the CD, it was self-produced, and back then recording was, those are some pretty late 90s, recording music was a little different back then. The CD was okay, but I loved the lyrics and I loved the message. But when I saw the band live, I saw a performance, and it reminded me of like the first time I saw, even though it's a completely different genre, like Rage Against the Machine or The Cure or Ministry or something like that, where I was just like, whoa, this is special. I have to be a part of this. I have to do this. So I broke my lease. I packed up my little Volkswagen car and I moved down to Texas, and I've lived here ever since. That was 1998. Joined the band, hit it right off, became just best friends with the guys in the band. And to this day, we're all family. All of our kids have grown up together. Never looked back. And I've been really, really blessed to be able to be in a band that we didn't have a lot of success early on, and I think that has a little something to do with why we're still around. Because I see a lot of bands that did have quick success and they didn't know how to handle it. We made a record that at the time cost about $600,000, I want to say, which is unheard of now. And it tanked. It didn't do anything. We got signed. I skipped that part. Sorry, we got signed to Universal, right? And went and made a record with a producer, which I'll get into, and put this record out, and it tanked. Didn't do anything.
Was that 2000? When was
that?
That
was 2000, exactly. Yeah, it was perfect. 2000. The record came out. It's called Consent to Treatment. And we were all like, oh, we're signed. We're going to be stars. We have this huge producer. Blah 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 blah. And the record comes out, and it's like we're playing in the Hastings parking lot in San Marcos. And there's 30 people there, and it's like,
oh no,
where's the tour? What's going on here? But what we did, which I think is, I think there is a lesson, for artists and for younger musicians that could pay attention to this, especially now when you have to tour, is we didn't give up. We didn't let that deter us. We didn't get, we were pissed, but we didn't let it beat us. We didn't let we didn't just feel like, okay, that's the end. That's the end of the road. Instead, what we did was we went on our own dime to a studio in Houston with a local producer and co-produced an EP. And then that song got on the radio, and then we re-signed to the exact same record label, which never happens. It's like breaking up and getting back together. It's really weird, right? But we got courted by a few labels, and then it was like, with them, it was like, you kind of owe us, and they were like, please, we'll make it up to you. We screwed up, and we were like, yeah, you did. So we re-signed with that label, and then we made another record in the early 2000s, made a record called Foiled, and we had a song that was 7 minutes long. Head of the record label said, turn that down to the 3.5-minute song. And we were like, this is not a hit song. What are you talking about? He's like, that's the one. There's a reason the guy is running a huge record label, because he was right. And that song was called Hate Me. The song went to number 2 on alternative radio. The video went to number 1 on VH1. And all of a sudden, all the stuff that we thought was going to happen the first time around started happening. We started playing the late night shows. We did Lollapalooza and ACL and all that stuff. And then...
That's Dorian.
Oh, do you want to do the... No,
but we'll say, Dorian, congratulations!
I've been hearing a lot about you, Dorian. Congratulations, man. So we started to kind of enjoy all those things that we thought was going to happen the first time around. But I also think that because we were a little older and sort of been through the ringer at that point, we were cautious. and we were smart, and we didn't want to just make a bunch of stupid moves and do anything for the wrong reason that we may have when we were younger, and may have wound up like some of those other bands that have like one song that blows up and then you never hear from them again. So we were like, no, we want to really kind of do this the right way. We want to play the long game, and we don't want to stop touring. We want to tour, and spend half of our lives on the road and be out there playing in front of people, because that's our bread and butter and that's what we do best. And so I am proud to say that to this day, we still tour. We tour all over the world. We do the UK, we do Europe, and then we tour the US at least 2 full tours a year. And then we still do festivals. We'll be doing festivals this summer. We're playing radio festivals this summer. And we're kind of the old guys on the circuit now, which is cool. That's fine. But we're still doing it, and we're still out there making a living. And what's kind of crazy is we're sort of doing better than we've ever done, which is, I feel really, really blessed and really fortunate to be able to do that. But again, I don't look at it as luck necessarily, because I think when you're our age and you've been around doing it as long as we have, there has to be a reason that we're still doing well. And I think that's because we never stop working. We get home, we go right back in the studio. We're constantly writing. I'm always writing. Our lead singer, is our primary songwriter in our band, writes nonstop. He has thousands of songs. And he never, ever, ever stops writing. If he has an idea, he will go in the bathroom. You guys use voice memos on your phone? You have a bunch of melodies probably, right? You listen back and you're like, what is that? He's constantly doing that. I'm constantly doing that. You never stop working. It's the same thing as being a producer. So I'll flip to the other side of it real quick. If I'm chewing up too much time, let me know.
No, dude, you got plenty.
Okay.
You're only 11 minutes in, man.
All right. So in 11 minutes, you can become a rock star. So the production side of it. So when we made I'll back up to when we made that first record, the record that tanked. We worked with a guy named Nick Launay, and Nick was this Australian, super old school producer. He'd done a bunch of really cool records, a bunch of stuff that, NXS and Midnight Oil, bands that I grew up listening to, and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and Nick Cave, stuff like that. Just really cool records that everybody like wanted to be like those bands. Like he was the guy that was working with those bands. And he was I didn't know what a producer did when I was in the band. I was just like, I was the bass player, and I was like, no, you're playing the wrong notes. No, the chorus is too long, blah, 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 blah. Like that, I was always that guy in the band. And I didn't know that in a way I was kind of being the producer until we worked with a producer. So we went and worked with Nick. We're in the studio and really got to know him. He really kind of took all of us under his wing, because we're all really young at the time. It was our first big record. And he would stop and take the time to show us why he was making decisions. I've worked with producers that just make decisions and they're like, no, I'm right, you're wrong, just do what I say, And he was not that guy at all. He was very, very nurturing. He was very like, let's talk about this and let me explain why I do, my experience means something, let me tell you why it does. And I learned so much in 3 months from working with that guy. And I owe him so much, and he has no idea that I feel like I do what I love now, not just as a musician, but as a producer, I do what I love because of him, because of the influence he had on me in the studio and working with him. He was so positive. He was so fun to be around. He was willing to try anything. He was creative. He was never just trying to, check mark next to the box to get it over with. It was always, hey, let's spend the time to do it right and let's have fun while we're doing it. And I loved that experience. And then I realized that I was, like I said, I was already kind of producing in my band, or the bands that I was in anyway, and I loved doing that. I loved not necessarily being at the front of the stage with the spotlight, but kind of helping direct traffic a little bit and help with the songs. Most importantly, those were our babies. I was like, I loved crafting songs and producing songs and recording those songs. And so I realized that being in the studio was my favorite part of the whole thing. Touring's great, it's fun. But being in the studio there's nothing like it. And I'm sure you guys can understand where I'm coming from when I say that. So I started doing it myself. And when I first started, it wasn't, I didn't go get an education. I just started working with my friends, and I would do it for free. My friends would be like, hey, you want to come down to Houston and work on a song with us? We'll buy you Subway or whatever. I'm like, cool, I'll do it. And I would go work with them, and I would do that over and over and over again, just so that I could get the experience. And so that I could, because it's not like you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm a producer today. Like you kind of have to earn that, And so I figured I was paying my dues. And in some ways I still am paying my dues. In a lot of ways, I still am. So I would do that, and I would say yes to everything back then. I mean, I would say yes to everything. If somebody asked me to do it, I would make time to go do it because I wanted the experience and I wanted to know that I could do it. I didn't want to feel like an imposter. I wanted to know that I could do it. So I did a bunch of work until finally I started to get to a point where I could charge a rate. And I felt justified in charging that rate, which meant people were starting to come to me and saying, hey, I like what I heard. I like what you did. Not just as an artist, not just because I like what you do in Blue October, but because I heard, an artist that you worked with. And I like how that song turned out. I want my song to sound kind of like that. Or, they said that you listened when another producer didn't. That's one I get a lot, So I started taking it really seriously. And I did it more and more, and it would get to a point where I would come home from being on tour, come back, have a day or two to relax, and I would jump right back into the studio again, and I would just do it over and over and over again. And then finally, my partner at Orb and I put a plan together where I was traveling back to Detroit a lot to produce because I loved that studio and I had a friend who owned it. And then there were a few places here in town that I would want to go to, but I got tired of trying to find a place that was open, or trying to find a place that had the right gear or that the band could make it to, or blah, blah, blah. And my partner and I put our heads together and we decided to build a studio from the ground up. And this was 2010, 2011. So we hired a gentleman that we became really close with named Mark Genfan, who's a studio designer. And we put our heads together and we decided, instead of just taking a small room in a warehouse or something and flipping it and treating it and making it a studio, we decided to build it all from the ground up. We broke ground in 2012, and on New Year's Day 2014 we opened Orb Recording Studios, which is now 2025. So for 11 years we've been open, and I'm super proud of what we've done. Not just to be a part of Austin and to be, a part of kind of nurturing the Austin community and the local artists and give the artists here somewhere to work, but also to be somewhere that brings those big clients that want, that studio experience, that brings them from LA, New York, Nashville, whatever that is. I mean, I can actually pull up our client list really quick. Give you an example, like some of the people that we've had.
Mm-hmm. Is Genfin still around?
Genfin passed away.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He did, yeah. It was very, very sad, and we miss him every single. We actually named our so I'll explain that really quick. So we named our A room after Mark. It's called the Genfin room. But our studio, there are a lot of things that make our studio unique and special. One is that it's actually 3 studios. We have an A room, a B room, and a C room. The A room is the big one. It has a huge control room, an SSL duality console. We have Ocean Way monitors, which is super unique. You don't see those a lot around here. We have a huge tracking room with 2 ISO booths. We have a piano room, tons of great gear. I could go on. And then the B room, which to me is kind of the perfect room. It's smaller. It's one control room, one tracking room, but we do have a console in there as well. We have a late 80s SSL G+. I love that room. I just love the vibe. I love the way that it feels. And then we have a C room, which is more of a kind of a plug and play production room. We have an 8-channel Apollo in there. You can come in and kind of work off your own, if you're doing Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever you're working off of, you can bring your laptop in and do whatever project you want to do. And it's built more towards doing like hourly projects, or if somebody just wants to come in and do vocals or, work on beats or something like that. Okay, so our clients, I had it. Lil Wayne, Pentatonix, Bieber, Snoop Dogg, Skrillex, Lil Nas X, Avicii, 1975, Beach Boys, SZA, A$AP Rocky, Fetty Wap, Bun B, Big Sean, Kaleo, Charlie XCX, Nothing More. We do all of it. We do everything. And I love that. I'm super duper proud of the fact that we have every genre of music. My favorite thing about that is when I'll go in and I have a day off and I'm just stopping by for something and there's something different going on in every room and it's 3 totally different genres of music. And I see everybody out in the lounge talking and meeting and getting to know each other. It's amazing. So anyway, enough plug in the studio. That's what we do. We've been doing that since 2014. Been open for 11 years now. And beyond that, I also dabble in some management, artist development. I do a lot of songwriting with other artists. I'm 48 years old and I hustle every single day. I am constantly out there making work happen. I'm not sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. I think that people that do that may have a little success, but it's not gonna last. It's not gonna last long, because there are the, Timbalands of the world, of course, right? And they have more work than, they got enough to give to their entire team, right? But those of us that aren't there, right? But do this regularly and make a living doing it, have to keep, in order to stay busy, you have to keep networking. You have to keep meeting people. You can't sit around in your house or your apartment, just watching Netflix every day. You gotta go to shows. You gotta make it known that you're around and that you're part of the community and that you care and that you want to meet people and you want to talk to them. And one of the things that I would say that's really, really, really important about being a producer or an engineer is I think the most important thing is that you're constantly adapting, right? Things are not the way that they were 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or 3 years ago. Everything is constantly changing. The way that people consume music is changing. When we first opened, the way that we would do things compared to now is totally different, right? So I think that not only do you have to get out there and meet people and get to know people and be willing to do stuff. Like I said, when I first started, I would say yes to everything. But part of that was, again, because you never know what can blow up or what can lead to something else. If you work with somebody, you never know. You might think, oh, this is a project that is worth my time. But if you do something that maybe you're not sure about, it could wind up being worth your time. You have no idea, right? But I think that being able to adapt, I think being able to stay on top of things and stay current is really, really, really important. The music business has changed, the industry's changed, and it's not gonna stop changing. The people that sit around and whine about the way that things used to be, you can whine all day. Nothing's gonna change. It is the way that it is, So as an artist, you tour. You used to make a record to promote your tour, now you tour to promote your record. That's how it's done now. But as a producer, as an engineer, if you want to stay busy, if you want to do it here, which I think that the city's changing a lot too. I think it's growing a lot. There's a lot of opportunity here. Go meet people. Go spend time at these shows and go talk to them and annoy them if you have to. But let them just give you a chance. Just sit down in a room and work with them. And then as far as being a studio owner and what we look for, I'm super proud of this. And I think this is very unique about Orb. We have 5 engineers on staff. They were all interns. Every one of them. We didn't go look somewhere else. We didn't go try to find somebody out in LA with the credits or whatever. We had people that came in right out of school or whatever that was, and the ones who really wanted it and who were really hungry kept showing up and then kept showing up and kept showing up and then started doing projects and then started mixing and then started sitting in and assisting and then started getting on Pro Tools and driving. And then one thing led to another. And so now all of our staff are former interns and they're all doing very well. And we have some former staff / former interns that have moved on to do some huge things that are doing some really great stuff. We had Caleb Contreras actually used to be at the studio. He's got a song on the new Rihanna record that's coming out, So I'm so proud of that. I love the fact that we didn't just do what a lot of studios do and try to find somebody with a ton of experience. Instead, we took the time to watch and see what people wanted, see who wanted it, see who was really hungry, and then gave those people a chance and brought them up from the inside. And that's part of the reason that we don't have a lot of turnover either. We've had those same 5 engineers for 4 years now, I want to say. So, yeah. So that's my story.
Nice.
Yeah,
good. Congratulations. Yeah.
And I love questions. I do love questions. So that's my favorite part is the Q&A. We are doing that.
Who wants to ask some questions?
So you said, recording has changed for y'all at Orb. How often are y'all using the SSLs?
Not very often. It depends on what it is,
Right.
to be honest with you. You know, it depends on what project it is. I find that, and I don't want to pigeonhole things by genre necessarily, you know, but this is just observation. I think that, you know, we don't have a tape machine anymore, for example.
Gotcha.
It just wasn't getting used, right? But when we did have a tape machine, I can tell you that 4 out of the 5 artists that used it were country artists. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Kind of an old school, more vintage way of, you know, approach of doing things, right? It's a much slower process. It's just a completely different animal. The SSL, both of the SSLs, kind of the same thing, you know. They just don't get used a whole lot because I feel like people move so fast now, you know? So I think that people, they like knowing that it's there and it looks great and it does sound great, don't get me wrong. But I think that when you're doing a full album, it's a lot easier to kind of set up and stay set up for a while. That's another thing. So much you guys know this, setup and teardown can be a nightmare. When you have a, you know, a salsa band or something, like that's a lot. You can spend hours at the end of the night tearing down. So if you're doing, which I think a lot of recordings now are fast. They're very quick. It's like, hey, we got one song, we need it done tomorrow. It's just not super practical. So I think that people want to get in and out as quick as possible, you know? So, but when we're doing more full albums and full records and we know that we can stay set up for a while and we can experiment more, then we can bring the SSL into the equation a little bit more, for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
How'd you come up with the name for Orb?
Oh man, I hate this question. I had a different name. So my partner came up with the name, and I'll be honest with you, this is kind of like, I'm in like 5 bands, and one of the bands is just me and one other guy, which I don't ever recommend doing because there are no tiebreakers when you disagree about something. And coming up with a name for the band took, I think, 3 or 4 months. We had this huge list. It was so ridiculous, right? And I'm like, nobody cares, come on. And so the studio is no different. It's the same thing. It's me and my partner, and we're like, what about this? Nah. What about this? Nah. So I wanted to call it something, and I really liked it, and he just wasn't into it, and I respected that. And I think I was just so beat down and tired by the time he came up with Orb that I was like, okay, cool, let's go with that. That sounds great. But the one thing that I did like about Orb is sometimes I hear people call it the Orb, and I don't know why, but I like that. People are like, oh, I was at the Orb. Oh yeah, I've been to the Orb. And that just sounds cool to me.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better answer for you, man. I do. But it just sounds cool.
Sounds like you're in the Globe, man, or something, you know?
CB,
cool.
my partner, he did have an explanation for it, and it had to do with tone and
There
how
you
round tone can be and all this. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I get it. Sounds cool. Let's go with it.
Yeah.
So it's a good question.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
What was your most memorable studio session, and what was the studio session that you learned one of your biggest lessons?
Actually, I would say probably.
You might repeat the question.
Oh, yeah.
People
So-
online won't hear the question.
For
so-
sure, yeah. So my most memorable studio session also happens to be the one that I think I learned my biggest lesson at. And I will give another example of the lesson thing. But I got to work with one of my heroes. I grew up huge Run DMC fan when I was a kid. Tougher Than Leather. It was, I think, maybe the first or second cassette I ever bought. So when I had the opportunity
What's a cassette?
Yeah, right. You guys know what a cassette is? That's how we used to listen to music in our car. So DMC came through, and one of my friends, Kenny Olson, who's a phenomenal guitar player, he's played with, he does the Jimi Hendrix Experience. He does a bunch of really cool stuff. He had worked with Run DMC on some stuff. And Kenny and I grew up together. And so we made this whole plan. Kenny flew in, and DMC came in. He was in town, and his manager is a friend of mine, so he hooked the whole thing up. And we wrote, co-wrote, got to play bass on and produce a song with DMC. And to me, I learned that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much success you have or what your accolades or your awards are or whatever. If you're kind and you're cool to people, you're going to leave an impression on them. And he was the kindest, most humble person I've ever met in my life. Like, I can't even begin, I'm not exaggerating at all when I say he was the nicest dude I've ever met, like ever. He gave me his hat. You know, the old, it's above my office in the studio. It's so awesome. But I remember leaving that session and being like, okay, I was trying to keep my cool the whole time. I was trying to act like, oh yeah, you know, I belong here. But when it was over and he left, I was like, man, I need to realize that whether it's being in the band and meeting a fan, or it's being in the studio and working with somebody, you know, from that perspective, like I can't ever forget where I came from, and I can't ever not be humble. Like you always have to try to relate to people on a human level first. And I think he just made such an effort to get to know everybody in the room and learn their names, you know, that it just left such an impact on me. And I'm super grateful for that, for sure. Yeah. One other quick thing, and this is kind of the opposite. I learned that in another session, and this was actually a session I wasn't producing, it was a session I was playing bass on, that you have to be prepared. You got to be prepared. You cannot walk into a session not having any idea what to expect, because it can really bite you in the ass. Yes, you can come in and be like, you know what? I didn't listen to the song because I wanted to just react musically and I didn't want to overthink it and whatever else. But I went in and did a session, and I was the only person in the room that didn't know the number system, the Nashville number system. And I'm an accomplished bass player. I've played on, you know, Christina Aguilera, Blue October. I've played on a lot of different records. I did not know the number system, and I was lost all day. And I looked like an idiot that day in my own house. You know what I'm saying? So I went and learned the number system right after that. Do you guys know what that is, by the way? So it's basically...
It's 1-4-5-1 kind of thing?
There you go, yeah. It's basically if somebody... It's all scale-based. So if somebody like changes the scale of a song, instead of, hey, play an A, a D, you know, C minor or whatever that, or D minor, whatever that is, like it's all numbers. And so people are shouting out numbers all day, and I'm going, what? What? You know, I was lost. So that's kind of the opposite, but yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, what else we got? Go for it. What you got?
In your early days of producing and getting into these different rooms with all these different people, did you ever feel a sense of imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah. So when I was younger, I would say the first probably 5 to 10 sessions I did, I definitely felt imposter syndrome. And I'll tell you why. And in some ways I still do. I'm not an engineer. I will never be an engineer. That's not how I work. It's not how my brain works. I have to rely on an engineer, which means it's crucial that I have a good relationship with my engineer and that we have a lot of trust. And, you know, they know what I know, and it's just enough when it comes to the technical side of things, right? But the first few sessions I did, I wasn't sure that that was possible. So I was really worried that not being an engineer was going to expose me. But then I realized very quickly, like super quickly, that as long as I had a good relationship with the engineer and a good relationship with the band, and I was honest about what my strengths were versus my weaknesses, they trusted me. 100%. And they knew that I was there for the right reasons, and they knew that I was there for the song. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what anybody says, you're not there to make the manager happy, you're not there to make the label happy, you're not there to make the artist happy. You're there to make the song happy. So that's what I had to remember, and that's what I had to do in these early sessions is go, you know what? Don't worry about those things. It's okay if I don't know some details, or if I can't, you know, if I set up the mic wrong or whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter as long as I embrace what I'm good at and I can bring that to the table, and that's worth something. That's worthwhile to the artist. So yeah, I did battle with that for sure.
What else? Go for it.
When you guys recording music, do you guys ever do like bedroom recordings, or do you guys go all out to the studios?
I love that question. So we do a lot. So when we're recording with Blue October, we keep a lot of our bedroom recordings. We do a ton of demoing. I do a lot of demoing when I'm on the road, or when we're on the road. Like, you know, if somebody always has their laptop open and somebody's always working on something, right? I have Logic. I just bring it out with me when I'm on the road just to get some simple ideas down. A couple of the guys have Ableton. But what happens a lot that I've realized is, and you may have run into this too, is sometimes you'll demo something. I actually just experienced this last Friday. You'll demo something and it'll have some kind of weird magic to it. and then you'll go to record it, and you can be in a $10 million studio with the best preamps and compressors and mics and blah, 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 and you cannot reproduce that vibe that you got on that demo, right? So to me, we always kind of bring some of the things, whether it was recorded with our phone, or was recorded at home or whatever it was, we'll bring those things to the table, and if you can't beat it, they'll go on the record. It doesn't matter how it was recorded. You know, it could be somebody leaving a voicemail on your phone, whatever that is. But I just experienced that with a song that I was working on, and I wound up, it was a song that I was writing, and I wound up actually keeping some of the demo tracks, and you can use AI now to split everything, right?
Yeah.
So I split the vocals and the drums off, and I wound up keeping some of it. It sounded great. Of course, the guy I had on guitar was like, oh, that sounds a little off. I was like, I don't care, man. It's vibey. That's a vibe. You know what I mean? It sounds great. It's just got a thing. It's got that intangible thing. MGMT. Do you guys know who MGMT is? Mm-hmm. That first record, that was all done that way. You know, that was all, there's a reason that it sounds so cool and so lo-fi is because how they recorded it. So yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the Run DMC song?
So let me think of what the song was. I can pull it up. Sorry, I'm so bad with title. I'm even bad when I'm in the studio with bands with titles. I'm like the song, and I'll sing the melody. So it actually was just DMC, by the way. It wasn't Run DMC. I got to look it up. I'm sorry, it's escaping me. Yeah, it's escaping me right now. I can look it up on my phone. But he was doing, basically what he was doing was he has this thing called, which DMC, Daryl Makes Comics. And so he was doing a series of EPs that went hand in hand with his comics. And so it was a song for the second EP. And John Moyer actually was part of that too.
Okay.
So
cool.
Now it's going to drive me nuts. What's the name of that song?
You'll remember in a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, who else? What else we got? Come on. Here we go. Go for it.
Are you still, or does any of your family still do music, or are you the only one?
That's another great question. So my brother the answer is yes. My brother is a phenomenal drummer. In fact, technically, he's a much better drummer than I am bass player. Like he's so good. But music never, it was always kind of, school was very important to him. You know, he became an engineer and he works for Disney, which is kind of his dream job. But he still plays a lot, which is awesome. So he was actually here a couple weeks ago. He's playing some surf festival thing. So I got to go see him play, which is really cool. He's a great drummer. It's just, you know, for him, I'll never forget this. He's 4 years older than me, and we were kids. Kiss was like everything, right? Kiss was, I mean, you think Taylor Swift is huge? No. Kiss was like, there was cereal, there was bubble gum, it was like dolls, everything was Kiss. In 2009, we got to open for Kiss, Blue October did, in Quebec. 65,000 people, one of the biggest shows I've ever played. It was awesome. And I called my brother, because he was such a huge Kiss fan. And I was like, and I talked to Gene Simmons for like 10 minutes before we went on stage. And I was like, who's the one person who's going to appreciate this? So I went and called my brother, and he's like, I hate you so much. He's like, I love you, but you're living my life right now. You're living my dream, man. So yeah, my brother, you know, he does still play, plays in a few bands, and they're really, really good. He just, you know, he's doing the day job thing. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
What you got, man?
So I heard you talk about the team earlier.
Yeah.
Your friends. How did that happen? How did you acquire your team? Did you recommend it to me?
Oh, absolutely. So I think teamwork, here's what I don't like, right? And I know there are people out there that are going to disagree with me. And I know some of those people really well. I feel like Austin is kind of transitioning in the sense that there's not a lot of infrastructure here as far as a business goes. There's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of great artists here. There's a lot of great musicians here. I Belong. That's the name of the song. Sorry.
There you go.
It just came back to me. I have ADD.
I knew it was coming.
So to me, I think that a lot of these producers, right, here in Austin, they get a good gig and they're like, this is mine. Stay away from it. No, you can't have any of this. And they're really scared to work with other people. And what I see sometimes is because they're coveting that gig so much, they're churning out kind of crappy work sometimes. Like, they may have a really cool melody and a really cool top line or whatever, but then I'm like, that beat's terrible, or whatever, like there's a reason that you put a team together, and there's a reason that you rely on people and you trust each other. And that's because everybody has strengths and weaknesses. There aren't a lot of Mark Ronsons out there that can do everything better than everybody, So to me, I think it's really smart to surround yourself with people that are really talented, and then use those talents but share them. You know what I mean? Like share them, work together, get in a room, challenge each other, sit down and write with people, write a song from scratch, with somebody that you barely know. Like, to me, I think those are the things that make you better. And I think that when you work with different people, I think that it also helps everybody realize what they love and what they don't. And then I think that they take those lessons with them everywhere they go. I know some people that are like, man, I love editing drums. That's all I want to do. And I'm like, you're crazy. That's all. That's what you want to do. Cool. But they figured that out because they were part of a team, right? And they worked with people and somebody trusted them and somebody went, you're really good at that, And so to me, not everybody has to work that way, but I do see a lot of production teams in LA. I see a lot of production teams in Nashville, New York, Chicago. I don't see a ton of that here in Austin. I wish that happened more. I wish people, instead of just like, oh, this is mine, stay away, I wish people would be like, you know what? This would be a good project for me to co-produce with so-and-so, and bring them in. And I do that a lot. I do that with some of my engineers too. And I've done that with a couple of the engineers in my studio that had hardly any production credits before. And one of them is blowing past me right now. Like, she's crushing it, and I feel good about that because I feel like I had something to do with that, So, yeah.
What would you say, and maybe you had experiences with this, an engineer's approach should be if they're not able to sort of achieve a technical sound or that X Factor thing that like people are listening for, that's just not happening?
Man, that's an awesome question too. So if an engineer is struggling and they're not getting there, I think the worst thing that they can do is be pissed off when somebody points it out, because it will happen. Right. If you're not willing to grow, nobody's going to want to work with you. It doesn't matter how talented you are, right? I think the best thing that you can do if you realize what your limitations are is go grind. I had an engineer, in fact, he came from here, but one of the most talented engineers I've ever worked with in my life. His name is Robert. There were some things that early on he was still figuring out. I would go home and I would come back at 9, 10 in the morning. He hadn't gone home. I'm not saying that that's healthy. I'm not saying to stay up all night.
I think that's healthy.
But
that's the way it should be.
But I'll tell you what, it wasn't long that he was struggling with those things, because he would watch videos. He would watch YouTube videos. He would stay there all night practicing. And he blew past everybody, like in a short amount of time. And that impresses me so much. And I have so much like admiration for that. I think when people are willing to put in the time and the work, then they will get those opportunities, But if it's like, I've seen the other side of it where it's like, hey, this could be a little bit better. And then somebody's like, well, how come you're having so-and-so mix? And I'm like, because you're mixing, you have some work to do, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to be mad about it, maybe you should be doing something else, Everybody's got to learn.
So I suppose like in the session though, you got like 2 hours left.
You're talking about like on the spot.
Yeah.
That's a different ballgame. Yeah. So that's tough. I think that if the engineer is struggling, I think that you have to find a workaround. And I think that maybe the best thing to do is to come back to it and get help, to be honest with you.
It's kind of like honor, like.
Don't fake your way through it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I think that if you do that, I think that most artists can smell BS. And I think an artist is really going to actually appreciate some honesty. So if they're like, you know what? I appreciate the fact that you don't think this is up to your standard. We can come back to this part. You know what I mean? And as an artist, if somebody who sits on both sides of the glass, that would mean a lot to me. If I was working with an engineer, they're like, man, this sounds good, but this isn't quite there yet. Like, can we come back to this? Give me a little time. I'm going to get with my buddy, whoever, Johnny. I'm going to get with him and pick his brain, and then I'm going to come back to this. I would so appreciate and respect that. But I wouldn't sweat, you know what I mean? And then like do something rash,
Yeah, exactly.
you know. Yeah. I hope that answers.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no one X factor either, by the way, too. Things are very subjective. I mean,
Absolutely.
the reality is, though, too, I would tell you, skill, it's very subjective. Skills are there. I think you just keep going. The more you work with people over and over again, really more than anything, like you said, you're focusing on the song, and then sometimes the client may not even like you. Maybe your favorite thing on the planet, they may hate it. So, there's a lot of complexity there. You're getting into the X factor concept gets pretty gray real fast.
You actually just made me think about something else too, right? This is such a different world. You guys are so lucky in that regard. You have so many resources at your fingertips now. You couldn't just hop on the internet and problem solve on YouTube back in the day. I'm not saying that's the answer to everything, but you do have those resources available to you now. So you can use them.
Yeah.
So then to get through the session, if it's you can't just stop and be like, man, I can't quit the song. We're not getting there.
I think there's always a way to get to the finish line, even if you and you may want to add something to this, but I feel like it's not necessarily, we can't finish. We're done for the day. We're over with. I think that you can always find a way to get to where it needs to be for that day, even if you have to come back to some aspect of it, because it is subjective, like he said.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and if you're low on skills, because you just may be green, right? Do your best.
Yeah.
Finish it. Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah.
You gotta believe me. We spend our lives, literally our entire lifetimes, getting great at things, and it's a constant from session to session, album to album for life. So tomorrow's another day. But Robert's a good example. Buckled down, go grab
Worked
some
his ass
skills.
off. Yeah.
Next day, make a better record. You know what I mean?
That goes for songwriting too. That's not just engineering. That goes for anything in the music business, but that goes for songwriting. I write a lot, and I'll be excited. When I first have an idea, you know how it is. You're like, oh my God, nobody's ever done this before. I'm going to change the world, 9 out of 10 songs wind up being in garbage. You toss them because it's a constant process. That doesn't mean you stop doing it,
Exactly.
So.
That's something that's lacking majorly in Austin overall is songwriting, in my opinion.
Yes.
Of all the things, unfortunately, it lacks business, of course, but a lot of that revolves around just a lack of focus on songwriting in this town.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we have another couple. What you got?
What was something that you wish you knew as a young creative that you know now?
Sorry, what was the question?
So the
What do you wish
question
you
was,
knew now?
what is something that I wish I knew as a young creative that I know now? To be honest with you, retirement. I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
It was not until a few years ago that I really started to realize how important it is that you set yourself up, and you cannot be I know that sometimes it can feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck, but you've got to think about the long term, especially if you have a family. That's very important. So that's a big thing. I think specifically when it comes to being a creative, though, because that's not an exciting answer. I think the collaboration thing. I think I was guilty of that back in the day, that my idea was always right, And here's something else. I used to not only allow, but I would do it myself. I would waste a lot of time in sessions talking about why something won't work instead of just trying it. And now, even if I think it's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life, I will try it. I will at least try it, because you never know if something actually will work or not. There are no rules, you know what I mean? So to me, I think it's really, really important that you're open-minded and you're willing to try anything. If somebody has an idea, just give it a shot. And I think back in the day, I burned a lot of hours and a lot of time being like, let's analyze this. Let's talk about this. And this is why it won't work. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot.
Cool. All right, one more question, and then we are gonna. What you got?
Kind of to piggyback off of him, because he mentioned, when you were younger, but now that you're at the age that you are, I'm retired from my first. I'm 43 now, and from all the work that you've had to do up until now that they have all these great resources and people can network and it could probably seem a little bit more easier from when you were younger. So at being 43, like, is there a place for my age to be successful at this point to keep going?
100%. Absolutely. I think that as long as you're willing to, there are a lot of people, I'm 48, right? There are a lot of people my age group. What are we? Gen whatever? I don't even know what we are. But
X, I think.
Gen X. We're just curmudgeons about everything. You know what I mean? We just complain about everything. And like, I'm so tired of hearing about it. The way things used to be with the music business and streaming ruined everything, whatever. Like, it is what it is. You can't change it, But what I see a lot is I see people that they're musicians and they're working and they're gigging, but they could be doing better. And they might be happier if they would spend more time paying attention to what's happening and paying attention to music. Like, instead of going, oh my God, another, Ariana Grande song and rolling their eyes or whatever, like, there's some really good music. Like, if you spend some time, just because it was produced on a laptop doesn't mean it's bad. Just listen and spend some time getting familiar with what people want to hear. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I don't think your age matters as long as you stay current. You know what I mean? And don't get stuck in your ways. And be willing to change and be willing to adapt. I think the most important thing, though, I really do, and again, it doesn't matter how old you are, is establishing trust with your client. Like, take the time to get to know who they are. You know what I mean? Don't just go into a session, just jump right in. Like, spend a little time, like, ask them some questions. Like, what do you listen to? What do you like? Like, what do you do in your spare time? You know what I mean? Why are you here? Yeah. Like, spend some time with your artist. Let them build a friendship. My best friends to this day are all in the music industry. Their bandmates are their clients. That's sad, but it's true. So I think that no matter how old you are, build that trust with your client, because they will come back to you. They will try things, and then they will come back to you, and they will be so grateful that you are so cool and so easy to work with. You know what I mean?
Cool. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to ask our last question, and I always ask everybody. So imagine you were just getting started. Nothing's happened in your life. You haven't done anything. You just played bass. You haven't even met Blue October yet, right? And of course, think of it from the production side of things, I guess. Yeah. But and you're what would be, and obviously what would be your best advice for people to focus on and think about as they dive into building a career and and do your thing in here? What would be your best 2 cents?
The best advice that I have would be, and this goes for you as a producer, but it also goes for the people that you work with, and when people are approaching you and when you're approaching other people, because it's not just going to be people coming to you. It is going to be you selling yourself to people. You out there hustling and working and getting people to know that you want to work with them, right? People, there's so much music out there. There's so much music out there now. And just like anything, there's pros and cons to that. But there were filters in place, like with radio and things back in the day. You got signed, and then there was a whole filter to go make a record. You sort of earned making a record back in the day. Now, anybody can really make a record and put music online. So there's so much out there that I think that's more important than ever, that you've got to do something unique. Like, don't waste your time. And it's okay to be influenced by other artists. If there's a song that you love, there's nothing wrong with going, I want to make something that sounds like that. But you can't model the beginning of your career that way. I think that you can try things and you can experiment, but I think what you really got to look for, and this is even in experimenting and trying things as a producer or as an engineer, is what is it that's unique? What is it that, instead of like, oh, this is familiar, everybody's heard this, create something nobody's ever heard before. You know what I mean? And then when you meet an artist, even if they seem super weird and out there and you're like, whoa, you're a lot, if they are doing something that nobody else is doing, work with them. Do it. Try it. Just work with anybody that's doing, I don't care what it is. Like if they're doing something super duper unique and original, align yourself with those people, because those are the trailblazers and those are the people that have careers. Those aren't one-hit wonders. Those are people that last a long time in the music industry. Everybody thought Lady Gaga was nuts when she first started, right? Look at her now. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Okay, everybody out there, bye. And, I don't know, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks,
Very
guys.
cool.